Gotcha. Well, when the wind comes, then I guess you really won't be able to hear me. So thank you guys for coming out on this glorious day. I wanted to start off with an experience that I had this week. I had a West Virginia County Commissioner tell myself and probably 30 or so folks in the County Commissioner meeting that we are all, what's that?
47.
47, thank you, Tracy. 47 people in the meeting. This is Morgan County, West Virginia. County Commissioner said to all of us that we're living in a fantasy world, that spectacles like this, or like the meeting at the County Commissioner's office, amount to no good. They don't work, and that we should all not listen to the environmentalists, that we should all be quiet and talk and work things out with the gas companies to get the best deal that we can.
Wow. Wow.
That was an elected official.
Wow.
Exactly. I quickly responded, since I was there to give a presentation about this pipeline. I was there to give a talk about karst geology and the threat that this pipeline has on people's drinking water. I was there to talk about and ask that the county commissioners add their voice to our voice as we begin to rise up and stop this pipeline. And that's what I received in reply from one of 3 commissioners. The other 2 commissioners were silent. Silence speaks volumes. And so I quickly replied to him, well, I respectfully disagree with you that these kinds of spectacles do in fact accomplish a great many things, because we banned fracking in the state of Maryland because of these spectacles. We didn't sit idly by. We didn't sit idly by. We didn't, wait for the government to do hopefully what we wanted them to do. No, we stood up and we created a spectacle and we banned fracking in the state of Maryland. So I say to that commissioner, we continue on with these spectacles, because this is how here in McCoy's Ferry Campground and the other campgrounds that we're going to be having encampments and have had encampments all summer long, is a way to show our support and to bring everybody together, to educate ourselves so that we can rise up and be one voice. So the Eastern Panhandle Expansion Project, I should say. So this is a pipeline that TransCanada and Mountaineer Gas, TransCanada, as you all know, probably one of the worst records of pipeline installation in this country and in their native country of Canada. And the local gas company, Mountaineer Gas, have teamed up together to put in what seems to be a fairly short pipeline compared to the 400, 600 so mile pipelines that are crisscross the United States that are being proposed right now and being drilled right now. However, this short, small pipeline is not short and so small to all of us, because it has some inherent risks and threats to our drinking water. Yes, the companies say, well, there's lots of pipelines crisscrossing the Potomac River as we speak right now. That is true. There are several, as far as I know, 5 in total gas pipelines that are crisscrossing the Potomac River. However, they were done decades ago, and 2, they were not done in karst geology. And if you look at the pipeline pathways that you can look on the national database, you can see they directly avoid any karst geology that is around them. So they were attuned back then, when they probably used the trench method, to not go through karst geology. Now we have this handy-dandy hydraulic directional drilling. They seem to think that that's okay. So this 3.37 mile pipeline is a distribution line that's supposed to, or intended to, bring gas to a severely needed economy in the Eastern Panhandle of West Virginia. And that also is false, because the Eastern Panhandle of West Virginia is probably one of the fastest growing areas of West Virginia, brings in the most money for their government. We have, I call it the suburbs of the outer rings suburbs of Washington, D.C., because you have a lot of travel, folks, from Martinsburg into D.C. I used to live in the Martinsburg area. And now I live in Washington County, not too far from the C&O Canal. And the risks are inherent to all of us up here and to many downriver. The risks are many. The risks include if there were a blowout, a fracking blowout during the drilling process under the Potomac River, or under Back Creek, or under Opequon Creek. All three areas have karst geology. All three areas are directly linked to our drinking water source, the Potomac River. We here stand right now probably a few miles upriver from the Washington County intake and the Martinsburg intake for public drinking water, which serves around 100,000 people. Just upriver is where the crossing is going to be of this pipeline. And so if it does have any kind of an accidental disturbance, a blowout that would decimate the C&O Canal, that would harm and flow right into the Potomac River, may not be captured in time before it gets to the intakes. And so you have 100,000 people here directly threatened from an accidental discharge. And then you have, further folks downriver that could still ascertain or could also get some of that drilling mud and fluids and chemicals into their drinking water. But here locally also we have private well water. And I think that is probably one of the more systemic problems, because we see the problems now to this day, even before a pipeline. My home in Washington County, several homes all across Berkeley County, Washington County, tens of thousands of people who live in this area, they get their drinking water from the ground, from their public well. And we have an inherent problem in this area of bacteria. We have, because of the karst geology, because it flows so quickly and so fast that anything that gets put onto the under the ground or in the subsurface area quickly flows all across the area here. So karst geology, it is one of those terms that's being kind of tossed around. I call it the Swiss cheese of geology. It essentially is calcium carbonate. It's a rock that easily dissolves in water, and because of that ability that it dissolves in water, that it creates cracks and fissures and holes and caves. It is one of the leading reasons for the sinkholes in Florida. And yes, indeed, we do have sinkholes in this area. On the Shenandoah, there are some water sinkholes that occur every once in a while that you can actually see a flushing whirlpool in the Shenandoah on the edges. So it happens here. We have karst geology in this area. It's extensive in the Back Creek watershed. It's extensive in the Opequon watershed, which is an eastern panhandle. And there's a sliver of it just right where this pipeline is supposed to be proposed to go through. So this karst geology is a significant factor. But besides the karst geology and the accidental blowouts, which are occurring all across the country, even when there isn't any karst geology, it's still occurring. If you read the news reports up in Pennsylvania, there was a company in a pipeline up there that I think you'll hear all about, had several blowouts, and that wasn't karst geology. But karst geology has a higher risk factor. And the Virginia Environmental Quality Department recommends to pipeline companies that they don't drill in karst geology. They still do. I think it's the Mountain Valley Pipeline is still being proposed to cut through karst geology. Because the reason why they say we don't recommend it is because they've had issues with methane and gasoline vapors from gas pipelines getting into people's residence basements, into caves where people recreate. And so that is an example of how this karst geology can transmit this gas at long distances. And so besides the accidental blowouts you have, if it were to go in, the long-term damage, the long-term exposure of people in this area from methane potentially getting into their drinking water. So we have many risks that we should be concerned about, and that's why we're rising up. That's why we're not saying, well, this is a short pipeline, it's okay. No, it's not okay. We don't need this pipeline. We don't need any more pipelines. In fact, a recent news story came out that the pipelines that we do have in this country, they're barely even at capacity. And so these pipeline companies are building more and more pipelines so they can get a return on their investment in the federal, through the federal government or through their state government. They're building pipelines to make money, not necessarily to transmit gas. So we have an option. We have a possibility here in this state because our governor, Governor Hogan, surprised us all and said, yes, he will sign the fracking ban legislation. And so we have a chance to push him a little bit more to say, look, this is a pipeline that's carrying frack gas through our state that has absolutely no benefits to this state, and all Marylanders and everyone else downstream and West Virginians assume all the risks, especially because it's in karst geology. Even if they were to move it, we're still going to fight it because we don't need any more pipelines crisscrossing the state. And the way that we can do that in this state is through the 401 certification process. The 401 certification process through the Clean Water Act gives the states the right to review any federal project to make sure that it is not going to harm or pollute their water resources or create an undeserved risk to their water resources. This has been done up in New York. New York governor used the 401 certification process to stop 2 pipeline projects up there because they deemed that there was inherent risk with that pipeline to their state's water resources. And the same thing can happen in this state. And so we have that ability. We have that option here. And I think this is our way of showing, creating a spectacle to show the state that we are rising, we are gaining momentum. I would imagine between Food and Water Watch, Chesapeake Climate Action Network, Potomac Riverkeeper Network, Waterkeeper Chesapeake, Sierra Club. We're gaining momentum and we're getting tens and thousands of people on board with us. And I think we're going to give them hell. I really do. I don't have too much more, but I can take questions now if that's acceptable, or do you want to go on to the next speaker?
I think we'll move on during dinner. Folks can ask questions.
I won't be here during dinner.
Then if anyone has questions, yeah.
I was just wondering when, what is the time frame? Like, how much more time do we have before it's voted on?
That's a good question. So where it stands right now, this pipeline, it's going, the first pipeline, the Trans-Canada 3.37 mile pipeline, it goes through the FERC process, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, which typically is a rubber stamp process. They are in the process of developing their environmental assessment. We have pushed for an environmental impact statement. However, they're not responding to that request. So we're waiting for them to produce the environmental assessment. Before they can do that, they have to have information from the states, from Maryland DNR and the Maryland Department of Environment. And currently, Maryland Department of Environment and DNR are trying to gain more information about karst geology, gain more information about gas, gain more information about what the impacts are going to be. And so they were looking at an approximate 4-month time frame before they can even come up with a resolution. So we're looking at close to the end of this year that there might be some kind of a decision through the FERC process or through the state process at least to give to FERC, but we don't see anything moving on it until the end of this year, first part of next year, especially since one of the FERC members of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission is not there.
Another question. How much of the pipeline has been built both in Pennsylvania and West Virginia? Have these companies invested in building the pipelines already and we're just holding out?
Well, so this is a pipeline that is an extension off of an existing pipeline that runs parallel with the state line. Columbia Gas, which is owned by TransCanada, operates that pipeline. So this is a tap-in, so to speak, and it's supposed to terminate in Martinsburg and not go any further. It's considered a redundant system, a backup system for the Martinsburg area because of the new Procter & Gamble facility that has consumed all the reserve gas amounts there. So it's definitely an independent. There's nobody else waiting on us. The first fear that we had is it was going to run through and go to Cove Point, but that's not the case.
I know a lot of people in Brunswick, Maryland, who get their water from the Potomac have no idea about this. If I can set up a meeting for citizens to come, would you be able to come and speak?
Most definitely. Most definitely. Yeah. Be happy to come and speak and answer questions and talk about it. I mean,
if I can set something up.
there's a lot of moving parts to this, and 10 minutes isn't justice to really give you the full details and the full information about where it's been, where it's gone. I mean, I haven't even covered what they promised to do, with the landowners. I haven't covered the eminent domain use that they're using in West Virginia and suing residents, sixth-generation farmers. I haven't talked about the contracts that they're having these folks sign and the wiggle room that these companies have to put more lines in, to put other chemicals through the existing pipelines, so they keep the Pandora's box open for them to add more down the road. And once they sign off on these contracts and these easements, it's permanent. It's theirs. It's not owned by the resident anymore. So they can do as they will down the road, maybe with an adjustment to the permit, but that's a lot easier.
I'm not familiar with forest earth geology, and as much as I read, I've never heard or seen that word. How do you spell it?
All right, so the word is Karst. Karst.
Forest.
Karst.
And it means something fractured pieces.
Correct. It's correct. It's a term that's used for a various number of different geologies that easily dissolves by water, cracks easily, creates holes and conduits for water to flow through very quickly. It is limestone. That is one of the. Okay.
But I think too, I think when you use terms like that, most of us probably don't know unless they're familiar with it. But, I think that word needs to be used and it needs to be explained right away.
Yeah.
And maybe even bring something in to show how easily,
That's a good point.
demonstrate.
I love your question. We have an information display that just flew over a few minutes ago.